Tonight, I've got a story that'll send a chill right down your spine. It comes from a long-haul trucker named Frank, a man who's seen more miles of empty highway than most of us have seen our own backyards. For 20 years, he's been crisscrossing the country, and he thought he'd seen it all. But one night, on a desolate stretch of road in the heart of the desert, he encountered something that changed his mind forever. It was about 2 in the morning. Frank was pushing through a long, straight shot of highway, surrounded by nothing but sand and shadows under a sliver of a moon. The air was dead still. The only sound was the low rumble of his rig's engine. It's feeling that familiar late-night fatigue, the kind that makes your eyelids feel like they're made of lead. He'd just taken a long sip of lukewarm coffee when he saw it. Up ahead, caught in the sweep of his headlights, was a figure standing on the shoulder of the road. This was odd. You just don't see people out here miles from the nearest anything. As he got closer, he could make out the shape of a woman. She was wearing what looked like an old-fashioned white dress, the kind you might see in a black-and-white movie. Her hair was long and dark, blowing gently in a breeze that didn't seem to exist. Frank's first thought was that she must be in trouble. A breakdown, maybe? He slowed the massive truck, the air brakes hissing in the quiet night. He pulled over about 50 feet past her and looked in his side mirror. He expected to see her walking towards him, but she was gone. Just vanished. He frowned, rubbing his tired eyes. Maybe he'd imagined it. The highway plays tricks on you after a while. Shaking his head, he put the truck back in gear and continued on his way. But a few miles down the road, it happened again. There she was, standing on the shoulder, same white dress, same dark hair. This time, as his headlights washed over her, she turned her head. Frank's heart hammered against his ribs. Her face was pale, almost glowing in the dark, and her eyes were just empty, black pits. There was a profound sadness in her expression, a look of desperate longing that felt ancient. He didn't slow down this time. He floored it. His mind was racing, trying to rationalize what he'd just seen, a prank, reflection. But he knew deep down, this was something else. He gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. The hum of the engine felt like a comforting friend in the overwhelming silence of the desert. He kept his eyes glued to the road ahead, refusing to look in his mirrors, terrified of what he might see. He drove for what felt like an eternity, the yellow lines on the asphalt blurring into one. He was just starting to feel a sliver of relief, thinking he'd left whatever that was behind him, when a soft sound reached his ears. It was faint at first, almost lost beneath the engine's roar. It sounded like crying. A woman's soft, heartbroken sobs. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the cab. Right behind him, in the sleeper bunk. Frank's blood ran cold. He didn't dare turn around. He could feel a presence there, a heavy, cold spot in the air that hadn't been there before. The sobbing grew louder, more desperate. It was a sound of pure agony, a grief so deep it felt like it was soaking into the very seats of his truck. He started talking to himself, his voice shaking. "You're not real. You're not real. It's just the road. It's just my mind playing tricks on me." But the crying continued, punctuated by a faint ghostly whisper that seemed to ride on the cold air. It whispered a single word, over and over. Home, home. Home. Frank was a man of logic, a man who believed in what he could see and touch. But in that moment, he was a terrified child. He fumbled for his radio, his hand trembling as he tried to call for help, for another voice, for any sign of another human being. Breaker 19, anyone got their ears on? One back. Static. Nothing but static. It was like he was the only person left in the world, alone with this weeping spirit. Then the temperature in the cab plummeted. He could see his own breath fogging in front of his face. A frosty pattern, like delicate lacework, began to crawl across the inside of his windshield, obscuring his view of the road. The sobbing behind him stopped. Frank held his breath, listening. The silence that followed was somehow even more terrifying than the crying. He risked a glance at his passenger side mirror. In the reflection, he saw her, the woman in white. She was sitting in his passenger seat. Her head was bowed, her dark hair hiding her face. She wasn't looking at him, but he could feel her gaze, cold and heavy. He slammed on the brakes, the whole rig groaning and shuddering as it skidded to a halt in the middle of the empty highway. He threw his door open and scrambled out of the cab, not even waiting for the truck to stop completely. He fell onto the rough asphalt, scraping his hands and knees, but he didn't care. He just needed to get away. He stood up and looked back at his truck, its engine still rumbling, its headlights cutting two perfect cones into the darkness. The passenger door was closed. The cab looked empty. He stood there for a long time, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The cold desert air doing little to cool the sweat on his brow. Was he losing his mind? He cautiously approached the truck, peering into the passenger side window. Nothing, just an empty seat. The frost on the windshield was gone. The cab was warm again. He didn't get back in the truck right away. He waited until the first hint of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, chasing away the deepest of the shadows. Only then did he feel safe enough to climb back into the driver's seat. He drove the rest of the way to his destination without stopping, the radio playing loud, not daring to let the silence creep back in. When he finally pulled into the truck stop, he talked to an old-timer, a driver who'd been running that same desert route for 40 years. Frank, feeling a little foolish, recounted his story. The old driver didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly, his face grim. He told Frank about the legend of the White Lady of Route 66. Decades ago, a young woman was on her way home to her family after her car broke down. She tried to flag down help, but a driver, not paying attention, struck and killed her. They say her spirit is still out there, forever trying to get a ride home, forever weeping for a family she never reached. They say she only appears to truckers who are alone, tired, and vulnerable. Frank never drove that stretch of highway at night again. He'd take the long way around, adding hours to his trip, but he didn't care. Says some things are worse than being late. Some things you see on the open road, you carry with you forever. And sometimes when the night is too quiet and the road is too empty, he can still hear a faint, ghostly whisper on the wind. Home, home, home. So if you ever find yourself on a lonely desert highway late at night and you see a solitary figure in a white dress, you might want to just keep on driving. Thanks for listening to Frank's chilling story. If you have a spooky encounter you'd like to share, drop it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more true tales from the road. Stay safe out there,